What's up, everyone? Today we are going deeper into the spine. We're going to be talking about giving you guys some education on understanding that you shouldn't be wrapping yourself in cotton wool. And today's big topic is all around using x-rays intelligently. You are not your x-ray.
What's up, everyone? My name's Yanni Bormeister. I'm joined with the 1 year older than last week, Phil White from Switched On Physio, and of course Rad behind the mixes, Richie. We are Unity Gym and the Unify Movement System. Guys, if you want to know how we turn driven people into athletes, you've got to download our blueprints. We give everything away for free, all of our biggest secrets, everything. Once again, let's say hello to everyone joining us on the live stream. If you are catching the replay, make sure that you jump over to the UMS Movement Mastermind on Facebook and join the discussion. How is everyone today?
Very well.
Good. Ready for action.
I feel like I'm still buzzing from the super thick chocolate cake that we had a couple of days ago. It was it's been a nice birthday weekend, so thanks for making it such a nice one in here. I love this topic, talking about backs and x-rays and pain signs and imaging. So, I'm pretty stoked this week that we captured audience where we can just talk about all the stuff I'm really interested in. So if anyone has particular questions, make sure to jump on and get them in. But
absolutely. This statement, "You are not your x-ray," came yesterday from Phil. And this is an interesting thing because, you know, for me, for Rad and I used to be trigger happy on getting imagery done if I hurt myself. I just love to go straight off down to the MRI clinic and get a couple of scans done and see what's going on in there. And since discussing this more, it makes so much sense to me, and understanding pain science a little bit more and understanding how, you know, the body works, and specifically the topic related to backs and back pain and spinal health, you know, because we were having a good discussion about this yesterday. Anything that comes from your back, anything that comes from in or around your spine is really, really amplified and can, you know, really increase our perceived threat. And I think that's a great place to start this conversation.
Amplified from the kind of emotional connection to when something's going on in your back, because it's really hard to kind of escape the feeling, like, you know, they're generally implicated in every movement. You know, if you have hobbies or like even sitting for long periods of time, the back's usually involved. So it can be pretty hard to escape the kind of constant thinking about what's going on in there. So that's where that amplification comes from, because as we've talked about before with pain science, it's very much like you're getting information from your body. You're not getting pain signals. You're getting lots of information, and it's turned up and turned down in the spinal cord level from your physiology. So your hormones, your systemic inflammatory sort of levels, and then at your brain, it's then those signals are turned up or turned down, and then turned into pain depending on your thoughts, moods, and belief. I'm going to cough. Sorry, that really caught me.
Welcome, Blakely.
Oh yeah.
He's saying happy birthday. Thanks for joining us live, brother. And anyone who is on the live stream on the UMS Movement Mastermind private Facebook group, do let us know where you're tuning in from. We love to know how far and wide the message is traveling. Yeah, Rad and I both have had experience here. From sort of imagery and how that affects your psyche and your psychology around training and things like that. And I think Rad's a very good example of this because if you saw his x-rays, it's quite alarming to see the severity of the pars defect, but it doesn't, and for most people, that would be the end of their heavy squatting, deadlifting, extreme exercise, you know, because they would totally freak out and be quite stifled by images like that. But then when you can see what Rad does and how he practices movement, the two, you know, are very, I guess, misaligned. And it's a great example of how not to let the limitations of the reports that you get from your imaging stop you from doing the things that you know and like doing. You can do and like doing, you know.
Did it stop you right at first? Or
Not even close.
No.
I can put I don't know how to say this, because when I've said it before, I have been told that, maybe maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh and I need to tone down the way that I speak to people, because it doesn't empower some people. But I honestly, I'm a strong believer that one of the biggest problems that we've got in modern day, the people that I deal with around Sydney and wherever, is that it's not just the spine that we wrap in cotton wool, we wrap ourselves in cotton wool, and we wrap our feelings in cotton wool. And when somebody, kind of tells you how it is, people get on this, oh, well, that offends me, that opinion. And I think that's one of the first things that I feel like I need to address here, because when I say stuff like this, I don't really think about how can I put a filter on this to be nice to people, because I believe there's a time and a place for that, but then I also believe that there's a time and a place to just understand that it's time to pucker up. And I know that for me, I've been told a couple of times in my life now by professional, I'm talking by surgeons, by people that are at the top of their field, that I will never be able to do the things that I can do again. I remember sitting across the desk from 3 of Sydney's top orthopaedic surgeons when I was 20 years old, being told that the tear that I had in my Lisfranc ligament will never heal properly. I will not only will I not be able to do martial arts and acrobatics again, which I did successfully for another 13 or 15 years after I did the injury. They said you won't even be able to run across the road again without being in pain. And because I did the injury when I was 20, they said by the time you're 30, you'll almost guaranteed have arthritis, and that'll only get worse. So by the time you're in your 40s, you know, and this is your life, accept it. And I remember sitting there like this. Here's the surgeon who's got all the experience in the world, and in my mind, the only thing that was going through my head was, "Fuck you! That is not me, mate. I don't give a shit what that X-ray says. That's not me. I'm not dealing with that." So. And then the same thing happened. So by the time it happened with my spine, when I saw the X-ray on my spine, I developed that attitude, because that was in my 30s when I saw that. And I was like, oh, wow, you've got a pars defect and you've got spondylolisthesis. And I remember in my mind going, oh, well, so what?
Yeah.
Like, I've had that. I'm still kicking. I'm still walking. And I think this is, so my experience with this, what does it mean? You've got to, of course, if somebody says to you, well, there's a bone fragment that's floating around and it's a millimeter away from your spinal cord, and we need to, of course, you got to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I'm saying, generally speaking, like the question was, how did it affect you when you got told? It didn't.
Well, I think what you're saying is that you've got a choice. You can choose to succumb to the injury or the issue and become a complete prisoner of it or a victim from it, or you can choose to go, fuck that, I'm going to move on and I'm going to make the most of the situation. And I mean, the thing is, and I always go back to this and I just think, this is how I frame every issue that I come up with. You think back to times when it was very simple. Your body was very important for either producing labor and being able to provide food for yourself, which was always generally physical labor. I'm going back hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years. Or you were a warrior and your body was a tool to fight and swing an axe or a sword or throw a spear or use a bow. And I just think, imagine everyone back then worried about the injuries they sustained throughout their life, working in the fields or on the farm or hauling stuff or fighting. Imagine once we tore a muscle or we got a little bit of pain in the back. Back then there was no imaging, so there was no way of diagnosing it, but you experienced the discomfort, and I'm sure everyone did from time to time. Imagine that was it. We were like, oh, well, now we can't do our thing. You'd be dead. You'd die. That was it.
I thought of that. I thought of that a lot on about the 10th time that I had to get my ingrown toenail cut out. Yeah. And when I was sitting there under a local anaesthetic with the doctor cutting it out for me, and I was saying, I cannot believe how grateful I am for modern day medicine and for the ability to be able to come and see you. And he laughed, and I said, hey, could you imagine you had something like what I'm going through, 2,000 years ago? And he just laughed and went, yeah, well, you would have been in a lot of discomfort, wouldn't you?
Cut your toe off.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what would have happened? And the same thing, I think I say the same thing when I go to a dentist now. Yeah. As I sit there in the dentist chair, I actually thank the dentist. I say, thank you so much for doing this for me and putting me out of my pain in a nice, comfortable comfortable way, you know. So yeah, we have come so far, and we are in this world now where, you know, we get told all these things that we wouldn't have known about before. And I do think, like, I want to say quickly, another quick shout out to Miller Sambal, who's saying, "Hi guys, love that you're discussing this topic. I'm working through pain management and back mobility health post-injury and trauma, and what you're talking about is exactly the kind of stuff that's helping me move forward all the way from Melbourne isolation." That's awesome, Miller. Really, really cool to hear that what we're saying is helping you. And yeah, this is the drum that we're trying to beat. You know, you've had trauma, you've had an injury, you're coming out of it, but you choose the way that you go forward.
Yeah. So now I think would be a good time to kind of talk about when it's a really good idea to get imaging and when it's quite useful and when maybe it's not. And also just a big old disclaimer that this is, you know, a entertainment discussion, not specific medical advice for you.
Absolutely.
So please, if you are dealing with this, like with injuries, talk to a professional. And go with their advice. But hopefully this should, again, with what I love about this, the chance to talk to people here is that I can hopefully give you ideas about what the kind of questions you should be asking health practitioners and the things you can look out for and sort of principles to take towards your rehab. And
also just to, like, you know, again, if I could say what was my strength that got me to where I am, there was a time when I knew nothing like what I know now. I knew nothing, and all I had was a fierce belief that I wanted more than to be that injured person. That's the only thing that I was armed with. And with that attitude alone, it arms you to when you get told something that doesn't resonate with you. It's not that you ignore it, you take it on board, but you look for something else that you can bring into your knowledge, right? Anyway, Phil?
Yeah. Before we validate the X-rays and the scans, I want to share a little bit about my history because I am a firm believer of using them as tools and everything, and that's what you're going to talk about in just a second. But when I fell off a horse at 8 years old, my spine and my body was a mess, and it was really, you know, back then, I think things have changed a lot in the last 30 years, but back then there was a big notion or sense of people trying to scale down your expectations after you'd sustained quite a severe injury. Like, it was almost like they were trying to lower your expectations of what you were going to be capable of in life. And I think Rad had that experience. I certainly had that experience because I was kind of told, and I mostly, you know, when you're 8 years old, you're old enough to be able to hear a conversation going on between your parents and the doctors and know what they're saying. You know, they don't tell it to you directly, but they say it in a way that you can decipher what they're talking about. And I was essentially told, that I would never fully recover, and that, you know, the damage to my spine and the damage to my arm and the damage to my shoulder, it was all stuff that is, you know, is going to affect me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, this kind of comes from a place in which, you know, as a medical practitioner, you are at such risk of people suing you, or like there's insurance issues around if you say someone can do something and then they like hurt themselves in the process. So it's kind of a unfortunate way in which the system that like runs healthcare basically puts practitioners on the conservative side of things because there's this risk that, you know, you could be deregistered and sued if you say something that's, you know, like, so being on the kind of ultra conservative, ultra you know, sort of protective side of things is the way that the system has kind of pushed everyone.
Yeah,
it's really hard to.
So I guess the lesson in that is that you should be grateful for for what they can provide you, but it's also up to the individual to pursue and push their boundaries and limitations and kind of decide how you're going to take that information. Because if I had have listened to what was said back then, I'd be nowhere near I was. And it actually did caused me to form an injury identity that stuck with me for 2 decades. You know, it wasn't until my mid-20s that I started to stop introducing myself as the person who had a fucked back. You know, to stop whenever I would go to the gym, I didn't do certain things. I didn't even try certain things. We were talking about this yesterday because I had this injury identity. I didn't squat. I only did leg press or leg extensions. I didn't even explore the use of free weights and great movements like the deadlift and the squat and things like that, and functional exercise, because I was so fearful of this injury that I'd carried since I was a young child. And the injury was real. The pain I experienced was real. The attacks and the reoccurrences I had were very real. But the problem was that I was in this self-perpetuating reality where the fact that I didn't do these exercises was the reason why I remained in this state of fragility, you know, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot more later on in the week, and how you can move out of that state, because there's going to be a lot of people who are in that state right now where you feel trapped. You feel like, well, you guys are telling me that I should deadlift and squat, but I can't, because the moment I pick up a barbell, it triggers my injury, or the moment I do this, it triggers that. And there is a pathway for you. There is an answer that we're gonna help with over the next couple of days, but just know that, you know, what Phil said is very true. There's reasons why practitioners will limit your expectations, you know, that they kind of have to. They have to protect themselves, and they're doing great work, and we should be very grateful for modern medicine, but you also need to understand its limitations. And one of the big limitations is around the psychology of injury and pain management. It's a very new topic for everybody. You know, a lot has changed in the last 10 years in how they teach physiotherapists how to practice. And so over the next few decades, you know, there's a lot of really great research coming out about the concept of placebo and how strong the mind is in helping manage pain and overcoming injury. And it's all linked. This whole concept of morphology and pain not always matching up is very, very important to understand.
Yeah, so again, just to be clear about what morphology is, just so people are not getting scared off by the big words. Basically, it's like when you see changes, or basically it's like the structure of you know, your system. So with the spine, your morphology includes, you know, the bones, the cartilage, like the actual what it looks like. And when you get changes in morphology, basically that's what people often, you know, it's like damage to those structures and change in the shape and you know, quality of those structures that is the morphology. But yeah, the really important thing to understand is that doesn't always equal pain. But I'll go into why, like, when it's really a good idea to use imaging. So X-rays, MRI, bone scan, CT. And basically, whenever you go see a physio, we'll be asking you a whole lot of questions, and the first appointment will often be, you know, just asking lots and lots of questions about how the pain came on, you know, what started it, was there an acute, like, traumatic thing involved? Did you have a fall onto your butt, or, you know, was there sort of a real impact? And if so, like, it's often a decent idea, like, it's more likely that you'll get imaging if there was an acute onset rather than just like a chronic sort of, you know, you've been sitting a lot and it starts to get sore. So generally, if there's an acute trauma side to things, you're more likely that there's going to be a kind of scan involved. And then we ask lots of questions around, I guess, nervous systems that are signs and symptoms. So that's, you know, weakness, like in different limbs, tingling, pins and needles, numbness, shooting, stabbing sort of pain. And if there are some like neural side of things, doesn't always mean imaging, but you're more likely to sort of get imaging if so. And then there's questions around that are basically looking out for potential for tumours and cancers, which you know, are around sort of like unremitting pain at night that never goes away no matter what you do, and like unexplained weight loss, heavy sort of night sweats that are unusual. Like, there's a whole bunch of different things, and if you have one of those symptoms, it doesn't necessarily mean that you do have a tumour, so don't freak out. But they're the kind of questions that make you think, like, okay, it's worth investigating. And so when you have these kind of specific pathologies in the spine, and you kind of get an impression that there might be one of those, that's a really appropriate time to use imaging. And, you know, we're so thankful that that tool is available, because, you know, otherwise, yeah, you could, you know, that way you can really catch things quite early and deal with them appropriately. But when it's not so appropriate to use imaging is when, you know, someone's got a bit of back pain from sitting, or they've, you know, been sort of changing what they're doing, and, you know, you start to get this sort of slow onset of back pain that, you know, isn't too bad, but it's like kind of annoying, and and, you know, it's that kind of like slow onset, no real sort of reason for it, this kind of non-specific lower back pain that is the kind of common term for it now. Yeah, that's when imaging can sometimes pick up things, and you might see changes in morphology. So you might see, you know, closing down of joint space, or you might see some little things here and there. But again, that doesn't, if you had sort of looked at the back before you started getting pain, it's quite likely that that was there beforehand. And the way of, if you have those changes in your spine, if you went in and had surgery that sort of, like, inverted commas, fixed those issues, there's nothing to say that that would then fix your pain.
Your pain, that's exactly right, yeah.
So
it's interesting.
Love you.
I actually had a flipped around situation where I had travelled to the Gold Coast, which is north from where we are here in Australia, up in Queensland, and I was doing a sort of bodybuilding workshop with Ben Pekulski, and this was the first time we met, actually. And during one of the workouts, my back went out doing a squat warm-up, and I was only squatting 70 kilos, but it was a warm-up, and I for whatever reason, my back just went into...
And just a really interesting, like, just a pause there. Like, I'm always so interested in words and the effect that words have on you. And even, like, the terminology we have around back pain with, like, your back going out.
Yeah,
it just kind of, like, it's all that terminology around back pain often that then kind of really enhances people's sort of, like, idea of threat and instability and fragility in the spine. So it's so... and I really try and encourage people to try and change, like, that terminology.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. So I had a muscle in my back.
What? So you're saying
just a spasm, like you would say, like a cramp or a spasm in the rest of your body.
So you're saying Yanni saying to put the back out.
Yeah, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, and it's very true. It's still my old language.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't know. Calling it wrong is maybe like, but it's just like quite unhelpful language, and it really kind of enhances people's like.
I think what he's trying to say is you wouldn't say, if you got a pain in your forearm, you wouldn't say my forearm went out. Your back doesn't go out.
Yeah.
You don't slip a disc. Yeah. Discs don't slip over, and there's no slipping of the disc. Yeah. Sometimes you can get something split, a delamination, and something bulge, but it's very rare. Yeah. And so people say, I slipped a disc. Yeah. So I should really say my back spasmed. Okay. And it was so severe that I was bedridden. I got myself back to our apartment, and then the next morning I couldn't get out of bed. Like, I literally couldn't get out of bed. It was so painful. It was debilitating, and we had to call an ambulance because I couldn't even get myself onto the toilet in the morning. The ambulance came, picked me up, took me to hospital, and they did all the scans, and it came back there was nothing. It was a back spasm, and I was so sure that I'd caused some severe injury to a disc that was hitting a nerve or so. Like, I was preparing for the worst, because of the level of discomfort that I was experiencing. And yeah, the radiologist, sort of the report, basically they picked up all the old stuff that had happened years and years ago that was pretty much non-issue anymore, but there was nothing new that they could tell me about my back except that I had...
And how did your back feel after you got the imaging back?
Well, a lot better, yeah, but I was still in a lot of discomfort, but they gave me some muscle relaxants and said, take those and you'll be fine, and some paracetamol, and they dosed me up on paracetamol in the hospital, and I was immediately a lot better, and getting told that, there's nothing serious. But I'm sure there's people out there that can relate. You kind of, when you go in there, you almost hope that because of the severity of something, you want your pain legitimized. Like, it's just like, and I was just like, I felt like an absolute wuss. I was up there with 4 of my friends who are all right into bodybuilding, and there's me, and we're all expecting that I'm like a paraplegic now or something, and there was nothing wrong with me. It was just a back spasm.
I did a few placements in hospital and one in the emergency department, and it was quite a common thing that you'd get someone kind of hobble in with like people helping them in, and they'd lie down, and then as soon as you kind of like told them that no, you're actually all right, suddenly they're able to like get up and walk around like a whole lot more comfortably. And it is again just so much about that sort of perceived threat.
And it was my perceived threat, because that was back in the day when I still hadn't sort of released all of the psychology around my back and my back injury, and I felt vulnerable all the time, you know. And this was only a year or two after I'd started to explore sort of free weight training and doing squats and things like that. It was quite new to me,
And so with that kind of idea of like perceived threat and sort of how attached your psychological state is to generally with back pain, I think it kind of goes on to our next point of the way that you kind of get past that and you build up that positive psychology around your back pain is number one, getting reassurance and making sure that, you know, what you've seen a professional who like understands this stuff and ticking off that you haven't got these serious pathologies I talk about. But then getting into exercise rehabilitation training, and ideally in a gym where you're doing exercise that you're interested in and are fun, not just lying on the floor doing GA activation exercises, which is a whole nother kind of kettle of fish that we maybe won't go into today. But when you start to hit some physical goals, like that's when you start to build some trust in your body again. You start to get that sort of positive psychology around like, oh, I've got this capable body that can do a squat-like movement. It can pick up things on the ground without having to, stress about it. Like it's once you start hitting these kind of physical goals that really turns down your perceived threat, because you're suddenly like, hey, I can deadlift my body weight, or even half my body weight, something like that. Suddenly starts to have this really positive cycle, not only in supporting the active stability structures around your spine, but also
changing your psychology. That's right.
Hitting
Hitting strength goals and getting stronger, moving into these big movement goals, flexibility goals, mobility goals. It doesn't only change the physical structures in the body; it changes the psychological as well. And it has this double-edged sort of sword. It has this double effect where it really, really starts to help you overcome whatever it is that's holding you back psychologically, and of course it builds more robust, a more robust body, a less fragile body.
Yeah, for sure.
And
absolutely,
it's just so important. It's so important. So, to summarize this concept of you are not your X-ray, it is so important to understand. For me and Rad, if we went and got X-rays and MRIs on our spine, it would still look the same as it did pretty much years ago. Those pars defects, the spondylolisthesis, all of the degeneration from my injury, it would still be there. You'd still see it, but we no longer are plagued by those issues because of the way that we train, because of our psychology, because we've learnt to overcome them both physically and mentally and emotionally, and that's...
And you've done the really important thing that, I'm sure if you've listened to us before, you understand is like, and it's all done in a progressive way. So I'm not saying go out there and deadlift your body weight and be like, yeah, nailed it, I'm strong now, like my back's going to be totally fine. Yeah. It's all about getting that sort of on-ramp into movement again, whatever level you're in, you just need an on-ramp. And I think where, Rad and I was talking about yesterday with the spinal mobility course is a great way of just introducing movement to your back in a way that is a non-threatening, very controlled by you, no external sort of load, just getting that even just the comfort with moving your body, feeling your spine go into different sort of positions, like that's a perfect place to start. And then you can ramp up, and then like Yanni yesterday, hitting a squat PB, like that's not just something that he's done directly after an injury. This
overnight,
has been years and years of just like building up strength tolerance and movement.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what we're talking about tomorrow. We're doing a whole show tomorrow about, okay, where do you go from here? Once you identify, or once you understand that you're not your X-ray, you know that you're not meant to wrap your spine in cotton wool. Okay, where do you go? What do you do? How do you progress from where you are right now, whether that's compromised or whether that's just weak or whether that's just not really understanding how to do things, to being able to do the type of stuff that we all do now, PBs on the squat, big deadlifts, amazing calisthenics, incredible feats of flexibility and mobility, So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Tune in tomorrow.
That's an exciting topic, and then we're going to bring it in for a landing on Friday. So, thank you, everyone.
Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in.
Big shout out to everyone that's listened on the podcast, Sound of Movement. Get over there, download, subscribe.
Share with your
friends. And big shout out.
I think this is like a really good one this week for, I had a patient yesterday with, he came in for a knee thing, but he had back pain as well. I was like, before you come in and see me for the back pain, like have a listen to the podcast series we're doing this week, because I think having this sort of good a good all around understanding of, all the things we're talking about here is just so key. And if you know someone who's had sort of long-term back issues, or maybe has a bit of a injury identity specifically around the back, like just like share this week of information with them, because it is really powerful stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam Polman has just said she listens to the podcast driving to work. Thank you guys for investing so much in your tribe. I appreciate each of you more than I can express. I've learned so much, and the mindset information has been life-changing. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thanks, Sam.
That is some feedback. That's great.
I'm gonna love that.
Nice one.
Not even
Well,
like it. I'm going to love it.
Well, yeah, I could keep talking about this stuff all day, so we'll
Bring
turn
it
off
in
now,
and
and
we'll-
I'll sit here with the mics off, just chatting to myself about pain science. And
See you tomorrow, everyone. Have a great day.
Have a great
See
day.
ya.
Bye-bye.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's the
far.
consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches